Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Salma. I'm a mom of 6 and I've been married for 25 years, alhamdulillah. Here we talk about all things related to family life, how to teach your kids Quran, how to homeschool them, how to raise a family that has a healthy mindset, a growth mindset, how to be mindful of parenting techniques, and how to have a healthy family dynamic, inshallah. So today we're going to continue talking about the large family logistics stuff, but with a little bit of a twist. We're going to talk about marriage, how to navigate love and logistics, how to preserve and nurture your marriage in an environment when you have a lot of little ones, or where you possibly maybe even live in a joint family where you have in-laws with you, or your parents, or other people in your household. Either way, it's not just you and your husband or you and your wife, right? It becomes more of a logistical issue when you have all these people around you, right? And as Muslims, we are encouraged to have children. So don't get hung up on the large bit here. Even if you have 1 or 2 children, inshallah, the tips will be helpful for you. But I come from a perspective of somebody who has 6 children and, who has worked on my marriage as well for the last 25 years. So those are the kind of things we're going to be discussing today, inshallah. We're going to talk about 3 tips, and none of this stuff is easy. So you might have to kind of take it apart and see where your hang-ups are, and what is holding you back, or what is the issue in your particular marriage. So as always, as we discuss these kind of issues, I'm hoping this will give you food for thought and discussion within your own family, that you can bring it up with your spouse and you can say, hey, there is this thing I watched, or what do you think about this? My goal is here to spur more discussions within our families, and that you create your own unique path. Check out my other videos I've done on creating a Muslim family vision, or how to discuss these kind of things with your spouse, or why even have a large family, and how to be intentional about your family. So I want to talk about 3 tips today. And number 1 is to sort of sync up and coordinate your calendars, so with your spouse, right? So the first thing is kind of to be aware what your spouse is doing and what you are doing, and that you can kind of sync up and check in with each other daily. What happens is, a lot of times there is so much stuff going on that the couples kind of lose touch with one another. So one of the things that I recommend is sort of a daily check-in. Okay, and now you don't have to call it a daily check-in, you don't have to call it a sync up or coordinate calendars or whatever. You don't have to give it a title, but if you do, more power to you. But basically, it's this idea that you regularly check in with your spouse about what's going on in their life, what's going on in your life. Just a kind of like a practical kind of thing. Hey, you're going here, I'm going to be there. This is what we're doing, what we're having for dinner. This kind of just like a daily communication, just like the daily check-in. And so this seems obvious to a lot of people, but to a lot of family, this is not a common thing. The spouses kind of pursue different lives. The wife has no idea where her husband is. The husband doesn't know what's going on at home. So that's where the disconnect already starts, right? And so maybe you're short on time, so maybe it's difficult to always talk face to face every single day. Maybe your spouse has long working hours, maybe you have a baby that's crying when he comes home from work, but you can check in on the phone, you can check in with messages, you can send each other voice notes that you guys can listen to in the car when the husband's maybe driving to work or from work. There's many different ways you can check in on a daily basis, so you just kind of have that idea what is happening in the other person's life. Now be very careful here not to just make it a complaint-based check-in where you're constantly just complaining about the things that are going wrong. You can kind of say it, as I've done in the other videos, me and my husband have done in the other video, you can say vent incoming. So the person, so your partner knows that you're just venting and that you just kind of want to share a little bit of your daily hardship. But make sure it's not just complaining that you're sharing with each other, right? Because that can kind of leave a negative kind of note. Share something fun that happened with the kids, send a funny picture of your daily life if you're a stay-at-home mom. But basically make time to check in and to sync your calendars, meaning like, what's going on, when are the kids going to bed, when is your husband going to be home. Like make an effort to have a routine that works for your family at that particular time. There was a time in my life where my kids would not see my husband for like 3-4 days at a time because he was working really, really long hours. But the kids had a really early bedtime because they were quite young, and they were waking up after Fajr, and they didn't have the stamina and the energy to stay up. And so we made a conscious decision to say, okay, you know what, my husband's going to come tired from work. It's not going to do the kids any good when he's tired and cranky, and the kids are tired and cranky, and it's just like that pre-bedtime craziness. And so the kids would go to sleep before he would even come home. And this was a difficult season, obviously. But then on the days off, he would make an intentional effort to spend time with the kids. But so what I'm trying to say here, be creative in how you manage it according to your lifestyle at the moment. But make sure your schedule is in sync. Make sure, so for us, for example, the time when he would come from work, this would be the time we would spend together, and the kids would be in bed early. Like, there was no point in keeping the kids up late, right? And so depending on your season in life, if you have really little ones, or if you have teenagers, right, the logistics becomes more difficult then, because now you have, and there was a time in my life where I had babies and teenagers at the same time. So the babies would be up at night or in the morning, and then the teenagers would be up at night. So you have quite a logistical issue, how to make time to connect with your spouse. So sync up your calendars, know what's going on, and then, be flexible, obviously, if something comes up, but keep that communication going. So the least level of decency is to let your spouse know if something's changing, right? If something's, if the work schedule has changed, if you're going to be caught up with somebody else, after work, if you're going out for dinner, maybe with your friends, let your wife know. And same thing on the other hand, if something's happening at home, if the baby's teething, if, I don't know, the toddler's had a really, really rough day, let your husband know. And then, that way you guys can kind of adjust expectations accordingly, right? And so the first one is sync up your calendars and communicate about what's going on. Create that sort of daily check-in. That can be in the morning, or that can be the night before. Often we'll just kind of say, hey, what's the plan for tomorrow? Run through any appointments, run through any logistical kind of stuff, because that helps us then be able to carve some time for ourselves, inshallah. Okay, so that's the first thing. A second thing is to be really intentional about spending some time alone. And we're big fans of date night or going out as a couple. That can be just, going out for a walk. That can be just something maybe more elaborate, going out for coffee, going out for dinner, but setting that intentional time where you're actually going to spend some time with your spouse, okay? Now, I've heard different reactions in the Muslim community to this. I've heard reactions from men who are saying to their wives, oh, this is a Western concept. Our parents never went on dates. My mother raised 12 children back home, and she never went on a date with my father, and these kind of things. Times have changed. The society has changed. Maybe there was not so much fitna back then, in the village environment or whatever was happening. Today, it is of utmost importance for the couples to have that time together, because there is so much temptation from every other side, right? And so there is a temptation that the couple will drift apart, and they might connect with somebody else in the absence of connecting with each other, right? And may Allah protect us from that. And so it's really, really important to make that time. And if your spouse is pushing against this idea, I think it's worth exploring. Why does my partner not want to spend any time with me? That is a red flag. And so it doesn't have to be a date, whatever you want to call it. You can call it a coffee evening, or you can just say, let's go for a walk, or whatever it is. Or it can be an evening at home. We just found it more efficient to leave the home just as a way, because at home there would be always distraction. There's always a child. There's always, and again, we have 6 children. So, but again, even if you have a baby or a toddler, we found it very important to kind of schedule and set aside the time for that. And so if your partner is pushing back on this idea, that is something worth exploring. Why are they not willing to spend time with you? And sometimes it is a logistical reason. Sometimes the moms will say, well, I don't feel comfortable leaving my kids, or but that's something that can be figured out, right? You can find a babysitter. You can find a friend which you can swap babysitting with. You can hire a nanny. You can lean on your family members. There's a way. If there's a will, there's a way. You can find a way to spend some time away from children. And I think this is really, really important because couples get caught up in the daily life, and then actually they realize that they have nothing to say to each other when they are alone. Okay, and I think this is maybe low-key why some couples are avoiding spending time with each other alone, because it would reveal the state of their marriage, right? And we found that, the date nights or the coffee dates or even vacations that we've taken together, they have been a tremendous blessing, but also they have been a tremendous exposure of like which kind of situation our marriage was at, right? And it's so sometimes we talk about that, like that how many people would not be comfortable spending 7 days with their spouse on a vacation alone, because they would have nothing to talk about, and this is the reason why we do check in regularly. And then if you see that you have a difficulty, that there's nothing coming up, that's then something to work on, right? But you have to start regularly with spending and setting some time aside. A lot of people will come up with a lot of excuses here. I don't have money, it's expensive, it's not safe. You can go for a car ride, right? I don't know where you live, but you could just go for a walk. You could go for a car ride. You can even stay indoors. You can even stay at home, but make a dedicated at home night. Or you could just even sit in your driveway or sit, like I said, you could ask your family members to help you with the kids. You could hire a babysitter. You can find a university student. It takes time to establish these relationships, but I think it's important to have some regular time away from the kids for the health of any marriage, and particularly for a marriage that involves a lot of children, because there is so many needs. Everybody wants something from you. I have 6 children, and there is not a day where I'm not failing one of them, right, in some way or the other, because I cannot meet everybody's needs. I'm one person, right? And so it's important then for me and my husband to have time to reconnect with each other and have a conversation that does not just involve kids, or maybe it will, but also for me to be able to listen to what's going on with his life, for him to, make space for me, and to kind of reconnect. So that regular time alone, it's of crucial importance. And if your spouse is pushing against that idea, that's a huge red flag, because we should want to spend time with each other, right? And we have a proof from the Sunnah, subhanAllah, that the Prophet ﷺ did fun things with his wives, that he raced with Aisha radiallahu anha, that he took her on the day of Eid for the entertainment. So it's not a Western concept to want to spend time with your spouse, right? And maybe if we come from a generational trauma, where the families were separated, or they went through great suffering, due to poverty or war or genocide, this is totally understandable. But most of us nowadays live in circumstances where we can make time for one another, right? And so if you are dreading the idea of spending some time with your spouse, that's a red flag, and that's something that needs to be addressed, right? So first thing was to sync up your calendars, sync up your time, communicate with each other, the daily check-in. Second thing is to spend some time alone regularly, to set up a date night. If you get really good at it, take a vacation with your spouse. That could be a weekend away, or it could be a couple of days. And again, we have done this in the community, and we have talked about this openly, that we go on vacations, just me and my husband, that we take days off. And there's always that pushback, like, the men will say, I wish my wife would do that, but maybe the wife doesn't feel like she's got the support. Maybe she doesn't feel like she can handle the logistics. Maybe she doesn't feel like she can handle these kind of things. So both men and women need to kind of work on this and be intentional about spending time alone with each other, regardless of the number of children they have, but particularly if they have a lot of children in the family, for the health of their marriage. And we don't want to be here, after 25 years or 30 years of raising kids, and then we have nothing to talk about. And sometimes, unfortunately, when you look at the older couples, there is a huge disconnect, and it seems like only raising kids is what kept them together, right? And we want better than that, inshallah, right? Number 3 is sort of this idea that you team up and thrive, okay? So that you consider your marriage a team effort, because I see lately there's so much discourse online about women against men, or men being told how to run a marriage, or women, how they should behave. And it's all like men versus women, or it's like we're enemies, right? And meanwhile, we should be a team. We are from one another. We should, this would be a joint effort. So we need to be intentional, and we need to be 100%. So like, when people talk about, should a marriage be 50-50? A marriage should be 100%, meaning both sides give it 100%, right? And so I try to do my best, and my spouse tries to do his best in the way we connect and make this marriage work. So I start obviously with myself, like we cannot change anybody else, but I have to start with myself. Have I given 100% to this marriage? Have I done my best as far as this marriage is concerned? Have I put it as my priority to show up as the best wife, right? And again, I might notice some deficiencies in this regard. I might notice that I'm tired. I might notice that my self-care is not on point, that I can't show up, that I'm overwhelmed, and that this is all that happens, especially in a large family. But this is then something that can be solved if we identify it as a problem. This is not something that should be ignored, right? And so at the same time, if my spouse is 100% in, he will work on his whatever he needs to work on, but it needs to be a team effort, right? So we need to team up so we can thrive. okay? And so in order to make marriage work, it needs to be a joint effort. One side cannot make a marriage work, okay? So it cannot just be the wife's effort, and she's putting in effort and then nothing's coming back from the husband, right? It has to be both ways. And it also cannot be that the husband's the only one putting in effort. It has to be a team effort, and it has to be 100%. Now, not all of us would always show up at 100%. We will have hard days. But if we're trying our best, then we will be able to communicate, hey, you know what, look, I'm at 20 today. It's been really rough. The kids are, maybe sick, or, I'm really overwhelmed, or maybe I'm postpartum, or I'm breastfeeding, or the kids are really in a bad mood. Then my husband can step in with his strengths and kind of fill up whatever I'm not able to give at that given time, right? But again, we are making our best efforts from both sides. It cannot be just one side versus the other, right? It needs to be a team effort, inshallah, to make this work. So communicate daily, this daily sort of logistical check-in. Even if we think of the Prophet ﷺ, he used to visit all his wives after Asr, to check in with them. This is a prophetic sunnah to check in, to let your wife know what's going on, to let your husband know what's going on. Some men get very touchy in this kind of thing. They don't want to, let anybody know what they're up to. Again, which is also a red flag in today's society, right? So we need to communicate with each other about our plans, let each other know what's going on. It's not a sign of weakness to communicate. Hey, it's a sign of weakness when it becomes a control issue, right? And so, again, there's a lot of in these 3 points that I mentioned that can go wrong, and it is going wrong in a lot of Muslim families. This is what I'm bringing it up, is sort of that you can kind of sort out and see where you're at. Are you good with the sync up, and are you good with the coordinating schedules and the daily check-in? Okay, good for you. If you're not, that's something you can work on. Same thing with the alone time, with the date night, with the coffee date, with the vacation possibly, or just going for a walk, or just having some alone time. If that's not happening, why is it not happening? What's the problem here? Let's not ignore it, right? Because we have many years of parenting ahead of ourselves, and we should be excited to spend the time with the person that's around us, right? We should be excited to reconnect. And if we're not, okay, what's going on here? What's going on with the communication, right? And then the third point is to team up and thrive. So to come together 100%, both of us, and make this family intentional, so we can show up for all the children, so we can be the best examples, inshallah, okay? So I hope this helps, inshallah, and we'll continue talking about topics related to this. So do drop in the community post on the YouTube channel, or in the comments below if you have any questions, and I'll be doing a Q&A video regarding all these topics, inshallah, shortly. So I'll see you then. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.